Hello, this is Lady Chatterley's Lover. Lady Chatterley's Lover, the continuation of the romantic novel, the audiobook with me, Morel Benard. And so, let us continue. Lady Chatterley. Last words were, and not have many children, because the world is overcrowded. But I wouldn't preach to the men, only strip 'em and say, look at yourself. That working for money, hark at yourselves. That working for money. You've been working for money. Look at Tevershall. It's horrible. That's because it was built while you was working for money. Look at your girls. They don't care about you. And they don't care about them. It's because you spend your time working and caring for money. You can't talk more, nor move, nor live. You can't properly be with a woman. You're not alive. Look at yourselves. There fell a complete silence. Connie was half listening and threading in the hair at the root of his belly a few forget-me-nots that she had gathered on the way to the hut. Outside the world had gone still and a little icy. You've got 4 kinds of hair, she said to him. On your chest it's nearly black. And your hair isn't dark on your head. But your moustache is hard and dark red, and your hair, here, your love hair, it's like a little brush of bright red gold, mistletoe. It's the loveliest of all. He looked down and saw the milky bits of forget-me-not in the hair on his groin. Aye, that's where to put forget-me-nots in the man's hair, or the maiden hair. But don't you care about the future? She looked up at him. Oh, I do, terribly, she said. Because when I feel the human world is has doomed itself by its own mingy beastliness, then I feel the colonies aren't far enough. The moon wouldn't be far enough, because even there you could look back and see the earth, dirty, beastly, unsavoury among all the stars, made foul by men. Then I feel I've swallowed gall and it's eaten my inside out, and nowhere's far enough away to get away. But when I get a turn, I forget it all again. Oh, it's a shame. What's been done to people these last 100 years. Men turn into nothing but labour insects, and all their manhood taken away, and all their real life. I'd wipe the machines off the face of the earth again and end the industrial epoch, absolutely, like a black mistake. But since I can't, and nobody can, I'd better hold my peace and try and live my own life, if I've got one to live, which I'd rather doubt. The thunder had ceased outside, but the rain, which had abated suddenly, came striking down with a last belch of lightning and mutter of departing storm. Connie was uneasy. He had talked so long now, and he was really talking to himself, not to her. Despair seemed to come down on him completely, and she was feeling happy. She hated despair. She knew her leaving him, which she had only just realised inside himself, had plunged him into this mood, and she triumphed a little. She opened the door and looked at the straight, heavy rain like a steel curtain, and had a sudden desire to rush out into it, to rush away. She got up and began swiftly pulling off her stockings, then her dress and underclothing, and he held his breath. He pointed keen animal, breast-tipped and stirred as she moved. She was ivory-coloured in the greenish light. She slipped on her rubber shoes again and ran out with a wild little laugh, holding up her breast to the heavy rain and spreading her arms and running blurred in the rain with the eurythmic dance movements she had learned so long ago in Dresden. There was a strange pallid figure lifting and falling, bending so the rain beat and glistened on the full haunches, swaying up again and coming belly forward through the rain, then stoop in again so that only the full loins and buttocks were offered in a kind of homage towards him, repeating a while obeisance. He laughed wryly and threw off his clothes. It was too much. He jumped out, naked and white, with a little shiver, into the hard, slanting rain. Flossie sprang before him with a frantic little bark. Connie, her hair all wet and sticking to her head, turned her hot face and saw him. Her blue eyes blazed with excitement as she turned and ran fast with a strange charging movement out of the clearing and down the path, the wet boughs whipping her. She ran, and he saw nothing but the round wet head, the wet back leaning forward in flight, the rounded buttocks twinkling, a wonderful cowering female nakedness in flight. She was nearly at the wide ride-in when he came up and flung his naked arm round her soft, naked white middle. She gave a shriek and straightened herself, and the heap of her soft, chill flesh came up against his body. He pressed it all up against him, madly, the heap of soft, chill female flesh that became quickly warm as flame in contact. The rain streamed on till they smoked. He gathered her lovely, heavy posteriors, one in each hand, and pressed them in forward in a frenzy, quivering motionless in the rain. Then suddenly he tipped her up and fell with her on the path, in the roaring silence of the rain, and short and sharp he took her, short and sharp, and finished like an animal. He got up in an instant, wiping the rain from his eyes. "Come in," he said, and they started running back to the hut. He ran straight and swift. He didn't like the rain, but she came slower, gathering forget-me-nots and campion and bluebells, running a few steps and watching him, fleeing away from her. When she came with her flowers, panting to the hut, he had already started a fire, and the twigs were crackling. Her sharp breast rose and fell. Her hair was plastered down with rain, her face was flush-ruddy, and her body glistened and trickled. Wide-eyed and breathless, with a small wet head and full trickling, naive haunches, she looked another creature. He took the old sheet and rubbed her down, she standing like a child. Then he rubbed himself, having shut the door of the hut. The fire was blazing up. She ducked her head in the other end of the sheet and rubbed her wet hair. "We're drying ourselves together on the same towel. We shall quarrel," he said. She looked up for a moment, her hair all odds and ends. "No," she said, her eyes wide. "It's not a towel, it's the sheet." And she went on busily rubbing her head while he busily rubbed his. Still panting with their exertions, each wrapped in an army blanket, but the front of the body open to the fire, they sat on a log side by side before the blaze to get quiet. Connie hated the feel of the blanket against her skin, but now the sheet was all wet. She dropped her blanket and kneeled on the clay hearth, holding her head to the fire and shaking her hair to dry it. He watched the beautiful curving drop of her haunches that fascinated him today, how it sloped with a rich downslope to the heavy roundness of her buttocks, and in between folded in the secret warmth, the secret entrances. He stroked her tail with his hand, long and subtly, taking in the curves and the glow fullness. "That's got such a nice tail on thee," he said, in the throaty, caressive dialect. "That's got the nicest arse of anybody. It's the nicest woman arse as is. And every bit of it is woman sure as nuts. That not one of them bottom-necked lasses as should be lads in there. That's got a real soft sloping bottom on thee, as a man loves is in his guts. It's a bottom as could hold the world up, it is." All the while he spoke, he exquisitely stroked the rounded tail, till it seemed as if a slippery sort of fire came from it into his hands, and his fingers' tips touched the two secret openings to her body, time after time, with a soft little brush of fire. And if that shits and if that pisses, I'm glad. I don't want a woman as couldn't shit for piss. Connie could not help a sudden snort of astonished laughter, but he went on, unmoved. That's real, that's art real, even a bit of a bitch. Here that shits and here that pisses, and if I lay my hand on them both, and like thee for it, I like thee for it. That's got a proper woman's arse, proud of itself. It's none ashamed of itself, it isn't. He laid his hand close and firm over her secret places, in a kind of close greeting. I like it, he said. I like it. And if I only lived 10 minutes and stroked thy arse and got to know it, I should reckon I'd lived one life. Satir. Industrial system or not, here's one of my lifetimes. She turned round and climbed into his lap, clinging to him. Kiss me, she whispered, and she knew the thought of their separation was latent in both their minds. And at last she was sad. She sat on his thighs, her head against his breast and her ivory gleaming legs loosely apart, the fire glowing unequally upon them. Sitting with his head drooped, he looked at the folds of her body in the fire glow and at the fleece of soft brown hair that hung down to a point between her open thighs. He reached to the table behind and took up her bunch of flowers, still so wet that drops of rain fell to her. Flowers stops out of doors or weather, he said. They have no houses. Not even a hut, she murmured. With quiet fingers he threaded a few forget-me-nots flowing in the fine brown fleece of the mound of Venus. There, he said. There's forget-me-nots in the right place. She looked down at the milky, odd little flowers among the brown maiden hair at the low tip of her body. Doesn't it look pretty? She said. Pretty as life, he replied. And he stuck a pink campion bud among the hair. There, that's me where you won't forget me. That's Moses and the bulrushes. You don't mind, do you, that I'm going away? She asked wistfully, looking up into his face. But his face was inscrutable. Under the heavy brows, he kept it quite blank. You do as you wish, he said, and he spoke in good English. But I won't go if you don't wish it, she said, clinging to him. There was silence. He leaned and put another piece of wood on the fire. The flame glowed on his silent, abstracted face. She waited, but he said nothing. Only I thought it would be a good way to begin a break with Clifford. I do want a child, and it would give me a chance to, she resumed. To let them think a few lies, he said. Yes. That, among other things. Do you want them to think the truth? I don't care what they think. I do. I don't want them handling me with their unpleasant, cold minds, not while I'm still at Rugby. They can think what they like when I'm finally gone. He was silent. But Sir Clifford expects you to come back to him. Oh, I must come back, she said. And there was silence. And would you have a child? In Rugby? He asked. She closed her arm round his neck. If you wouldn't take me away, I should have to, she said. Take you where to? Anywhere, away, but right away from Rugby. When? Why, when I come back. But what's the good of coming back doing the things twice if you're gone once, he said. Oh, I must come back. I promised. I promised so faithfully. Besides, I come back to you, really. To your husband's gamekeeper. I don't see that matters, she said. No, he mused a while. And when would you think of going away again, then, finally? When exactly? Oh, I don't know. I'd come back from Venice and then we'd prepare everything. How prepare? Oh, I'd tell Clifford. I'd have to tell him. Would you? He remained silent. She put her arms round his neck. Don't make it difficult for me, she pleaded. Make what difficult? For me to go to Venice and arrange things. A little smile, half a grin flickered on his face. I don't make it difficult, he said. I only want to find out just what you are after. But you don't really know yourself. You want to take time, get away and look at it. I don't blame you. I think you're wise. You may prefer to stay mistress of Rugby. I don't blame you. I've no Rugbies to offer. In fact, you know what you'll get out of me. No, I think you're right. I really do. And I'm not keen on coming to live on you, being kept by you. There's that too. She felt somehow as if he were giving her tit for tat. But you want me, don't you? He asked. Do you want me? You know I do, that's evident. Quite. And when do you want me? You know we can arrange it all when I come back. Now, I'm out of breath with you. I must get calm and clear. Quite. Get calm and clear. She was a little offended, but you must trust me, don't you? She said. Oh, absolutely. She heard the mockery in his tone. Tell me then, she said flat, do you think it would be better if I don't go to Venice? I'm sure it's better if you do go to Venice, he replied in the cool, slightly mocking voice. You know it's next Thursday, she said. Yes. She now began to muse. At last she said, and we shall know better when I come back, shan't we? Oh, surely. A curious gulf of silence between them. I've been to the lawyer about my divorce, he said, a little constrainedly. She gave a little shudder. Have you? She said. And what did he say? He said I ought to have done it before. It may be a difficulty. But since I was in the army, he thinks it will go through all right. If only it doesn't bring her down to my head. Will she have to know? Yes, she's served with a notice, so is the man she lives with, the co-respondent. Isn't it hateful, all the performances, I suppose? I'd have to go through it with Clifford. There was a silence. And of course, he said, I have to live an exemplary life for the next 6 or 8 months, so if you go to Venice, there's temptation removed for a week or 2 at least. Am I temptation? She said, stroking his face. I'm so glad I'm temptation to you. Don't let's think about it. You frighten me when you start thinking. You roll me out of flat. Don't let's think about it. We can think so much when we are apart. That's the whole point. I've been thinking, I must come to you for another night before I go. I must come once more to the cottage. Shall I come on Thursday night? Isn't that when your sister will be there? Yes. But she said we could start at tea time, so we could start at tea time, but she could sleep somewhere else and I could sleep with you. But then she'd have to know. Oh, I shall tell her. I've more or less told her already. I must talk it over with Hilda. She's a great help, so sensible. He was thinking of her plan. So you'd start off from Rugby at tea time as if you were going to London. Which way were you going? By Nottingham and Grantham. And then your sister would drop you somewhere and you'd walk or drive back. Sounds very risky to me. Does it? Well then, Hilda could bring me back. She could sleep at Mansfield and bring me back here in the evening and fetch me again in the morning. It's quite easy. And the people who see you? I'll wear goggles and a veil. He pondered for some time. Well, he said, you please yourself as usual. But wouldn't it please you? Oh yes, it'll please me all right, he said a little grimly. I might as well smite while my iron's hot. Do you know what I thought? She said suddenly. It suddenly came to me, you are the knight of the burning pestle. Aye, and you, are you the lady of the red-hot mortar? Yes, she said, yes. You're Sir Pestle and I'm Lady Mortar. All right then. I'm knighted John Thomas is Sir John to your Lady Jane. Yes, John Thomas is knighted. I'm my Lady Maidenhair, and you must have flowers too, yes. She threaded 2 pink campions on the bush of red gold hair above his penis. There, she said, charming, charming, Sir John. And she pushed a bit of forget-me-not in the dark hair of his breast. And you won't forget me there, will you? She kissed him on the breast and made 2 bits of forget-me-not lodge one over each nipple, kissing him again. Make a calendar of me, she said. He laughed, and the flowers shook from his breast. Wait a bit, he said. He rose and opened the door of the hut. Flossie, lying in the porch, got up and looked at him. Aye, it's me, he said. The rain had ceased. There was a wet, heavy, perfumed stillness. Evening was approaching. He went out and down the little path in the opposite direction from the riding. Connie watched his thin, white figure, and it looked to her like a ghost, an apparition moving away from her. When she could see it no more, her heart sank. She stood in the door of the hut with a blanket round her, looking into the drenched, motionless silence. But he was coming back, trotting strangely and carrying flowers. She was a little afraid of him, as if he were not quite human. And when he came nearer, his eyes looked into hers, but she could not understand the meaning. He had brought columbines and campions, and new mown hay, and oak tufts and honeysuckle in small bud. He fastened fluffy young oak sprays round her breast, sticking in tufts of bluebells and campion, and in her navel he poised the pink campion flower, and in her maiden hair were forget-me-nots and woodruff. That's you, all in your glory, he said, Lady Jane, at her wedding with John Thomas. And he stuck flowers in the hair of his own body and wound a bit of creepy jenny round his penis and stuck a single bell of hyacinth in his navel. She watched him with amusement, his odd intentness, and she pushed a campion flower in his moustache where it stuck dangling under his nose. This is John Thomas marrying Lady Jane, he said, and we must let Constant and Oliver go their way, maybe. He spread out his hand with a gesture, and then he sneezing away the flowers from his nose and his navel. He sneezed again. Maybe what she said, waiting for him to go on. He looked at her and a little bewildered. Hey, he said. Maybe what? Go on with what you were going to say, she insisted. What was I going to say? He had forgotten. And it was one of the disappointments of her life that he never finished. A yellow ray of sun shone over the trees. Sun, he said, and time you went. Time, my lady, time. What's that as flies without wings, your ladyship? Time. Time. There. Join me for the next video of Lady Chatterley's Lover. Join me for the next video. Lady Chatterley's Lover, the novel, the audio, the romance of Lady Chatterley's Lover. With me, Morel Benard. See you then in the next video.